So if you take anything away from these slides, let it be these couple of points. And these are the topics we're going to elaborate on throughout these slides. Building a strong IP portfolio, understanding the scope and being able to prioritize your enforcement efforts, the importance of regional monitoring and enforcement, and leveraging local expertise. So we're going to start with building a strong IP portfolio. So this is maybe the most important step you need to take in terms of, being able to have an enforcement strategy that's actually impactful and working. It starts with building a strong IP portfolio. So registering trademarks in all relevant regions and classes. This is a huge one. What we often see is that once a brand has registered their trademark within the class for their product, they don't think about the other classes that their brand could be brand jacked or misused in. And this is huge, and it happens actually very often. For example, if you're a shoe manufacturer, but you find that somebody else in China has registered your brand name and is producing backpacks, you're losing a lot of recourse. You don't really have the ability to go to them and demand that they take it back, or give it back rather. So this is a huge problem. So when we're building our IP portfolios, we need to be proactive. And that not only includes making sure that you're covering all the classes for your product, but you're covering every variation. So within China specifically, we often see multiple transliterations of brand names into Chinese characters. So you might have 3 or 4 different ways that are commonly used to translate your brand name into Chinese. Beyond that, we're also talking about simplified and traditional characters. And these are going to be used depending on, this is another thing about regions, depending on where you are in China. So as far as registration goes, it takes a lot of consideration to make sure that you are including everything that you possibly can. And that's going to be your ammunition for enforcement down the road. Another thing is being prepared to meet country-specific requirements. So many of these marketplaces, they will demand original copies or scans of original copies, and there's this preparation phase that's very important. So they'll want color copies, they'll want records of any address change, anything that is different than the certificate that you're getting them. So we have to build this chain of custody. Businesses change, businesses move, they're renamed, and this is something to consider and make sure that this is all being thoroughly documented so you're not having to go back and re-register these trademarks, which is an extremely time-consuming process. So make sure that you're being good stewards of all the necessary documentation in your portfolio. And then providing proof of authorizations to use trademarks if any brand's registered under a different company name. With subsidiaries and with multiple names being used by businesses, this one's very important. So again, we are making sure that we're able to clearly show how each of these marks relate to each other and how each of them relate to each business that are planning on using them for enforcement. And then another big one is registering trademarks prior to launch of new products in each class and region targeted to promote or protect your brand. This is another big one because being proactive again and starting the process earlier is going to limit the risk of your brand being hijacked before you're able to secure that trademark or patent. And then when it comes to enforcement, as you're registering these things and you're looking at your product, kind of roadmap, make sure that you're communicating, if you're working with an organization, what is going to be available when as far as documentation and securing different IPR. And that's because you can actually, stop a lot of feature infringement by making sure that everybody is aware of what is coming up for your brand, and making sure that all the necessary protection is in place for when that product finally becomes available and starts being sold. Because we know that as soon as it starts being sold, it's going to start being counterfeited, if not before. And then engage with local resources to verify the strength of trademark rights. It is all about relationships in China. And you need to start forging these relationships with native speakers specifically, who are going to be able to let you know that your IP portfolio is as strong as you believe it is. And they're going to be able to maybe reveal different ways that your brand might be being used, and different trademarks that you might not have originally thought of to secure for your brand. I know an issue that's coming up more and more are products with multiple versions and not including the version within the trademark itself. So I have, a brand of headphones, and then I release the headphones 2.0. You need to make sure that you have that trademark for Headpoints 2.0, making sure you're covering all of your bases. The next one is a tricky one, and it's not always practical, just because of the nature of the way that images are used to advertise and promote products, specifically on your websites. But maintaining a reference library of your copyrighted imagery, and for both past and present products, is extremely valuable, because you might see somebody advertising your product, or rather their product, their knockoff, with your images, but maybe those images no longer are posted on the website because it is an old product. So when you go to enforce, the marketplaces are going to ask where they can see that image being used, and if you can't point them to it, then you have to be able to provide some sort of documentation that, yes, this is our image that they're using without our consent. And then maintain an updated patent portfolio to complement copyright and trademark enforcement efforts. Again, what you're doing is you're building ammunition to go after the sellers, no matter how they're going to try and market the counterfeit products. You might find as seller behavior changes, as you're implementing your program, that there's a shift away from copyrighted images, which is one of the easier ways to get things down, the really low-hanging fruit, if you will. And then you start going after the trademark abuse, your logo, your name, false association, brand confusion. But counterfeiters will adapt eventually to that too, and find ways to market their item by maybe misspelling your brand name, or hiding keywords with your brand name in the metadata of the page. So patent and having that strong patent portfolio is then going to be your next course of action, because if they're trying to sell these products and you have a really strong design patent, they're not going to be able to take it much further than that. It's kind of hard for them to argue when you have that patent.